Welcome to the Military Historian Podcast. I'm Lloyd Shellenberger. I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, my name is Lloyd Shellenberger. I'm the military historian, and you are watching a podcast with Ahmed Al-Abase. And this is going to cover the book Left Behind Letters from Baghdad, in which we are discussing the facts behind your father's death, the eventual coming to America, and all this. We'll get into it in a second. But if you don't mind, look in the camera and introduce yourself.
My name is Ahmed Al-Abase, and I'm very excited to be on here on the program.
I'm glad to have you. Okay, thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here and to share my story and my family story to the world.
How old were you when your father was killed?
I was 11 years old in 2005 at the time.
Okay, what can you tell me about that? What do you remember?
So July 16th, in the morning, early morning, Dad had a contract to go down to Baghdad, and he had to go get Esra's pictures and her birth certificate to get our passports so we can leave to the U.S. That was his mission that morning. The U.S. soldiers knew about that route that he's going to take in the mission, that he's going with Omar that morning. So I remember before he left that morning, we had our last semester for winter. And at that time, we all gave him hugs, kisses that morning. Omar left. He said, "Hey guys, you're going to graduate from school." That way we're excited so we could show our scorecards. So when we come to the U.S., we can show them, "Hey, we graduated from school." And we were so excited. So I went that day to school. We walked where there's a school at the village. Walked about a mile with Noorzi and me and Thar at the time. Schools usually in Iraq will get off at 1 o'clock. So we got off at 1 o'clock. We all passed our test. We headed back home. Prior to that, day before that, the U.S. soldiers came over, gave us supplies, and that was the last supplies we had. And I remember I was so excited because I really wanted to get into the supplies and food supplies, other supplies that they had for us at the time. I remember getting back, got into the supplies, got the MRE, and it was very delicious because some of the food that they had there was different than what we had on a daily basis. And a couple of hours later, my uncle, he came over to come see us, and he brought his son over. Then about 30 minutes after that, and I remember that day pretty clearly. I remember what I was wearing. I remember everything. So I was close to my mom when she was making bread. So we had this room where she'd make all her bread, and we had all her supplies. And we heard a knock on the door, and my uncle goes to open the door, the main gate door, and there's an Iraqi unit that was standing out there. And right now, I wasn't out there. I was still in the house watching TV. And at that time, they were actually playing animation, so like Goku. So we're watching that, and he comes in all crying and tearing up and hectic. We didn't know what was going on. He was yelling Dad's name, and he was just in very sorrow at that time. And Mom started crying. I pop out of the door, and I find this whole unit, Iraqi unit, that's with Humvees. They're standing out there, and they're all crying. And they finally looked at me and asked me, they're like, "What's your name?" And I'm like, "I'm Ahmed, I'm his son." So they're like, "Your brother and your dad are dead. They got killed." At that time, I didn't know how to really handle it or do whatever at that time. So all I knew was I lost my dad, I lost my brother. Everyone's crying. I'm crying with tears. It was just, you didn't know if it was true or not true. And we really didn't know what was going on. And so we were in a dark space for that whole day until the next day. We got reports from the Iraqi military saying that Omar survived the attack. Omar's with them. So we didn't see Omar for a whole week. But going back, my uncle had to leave, and my brother, my dad's stepsister came over to help us out. And so luckily we had chickens, we had goats, we had military dogs around us, and we had plenty of food and resources. And I knew how to use a gun, my mom did, so if anybody wanted to come over and like a terrorist or anything, so we had positioned it where we sat in the corner of the house, so if they came and attacked us, the last place they would attack would be that room.
So why would you think that somebody's going to attack you after they've already killed your brother and your father?
Because I'm the second person that's in charge of the house. So I'll pretty much after they kill Omar, mom has all the intelligent information. So they're gonna go after her. And now if a kid that's 10 years old, it's not a 10 years old kid in Iraq. It's a 3-year-old kid inside.
Okay.
Everyone had to grow up so fast and become mature. So a 10-year-old kid can have a lot of information about a lot of people. And so they don't want that information to be out there. So
And your dad kept that, if I remember correctly, in the kitchen in the floorboard somewhere where nobody could find it. Is that correct? Is what I was told originally? Right.
yeah, so there was when it came to that information, it's more like you had to spread it. You couldn't really keep all the information. So some information he gave to mom, some information he gave to Omar, some information he gave to me, but the information that I got was very low key information. So the information that probably Omar had was a little bit more higher than mom. Mom probably had way more information, but when you're around your parents, there's a lot of conversations. So you get to hear all these conversations. You get to hear about all the classified information that usually your parents doesn't want to hear, want you to hear. But you end up hearing these things, and you end up seeing things that you didn't intend to see. So,
Right.
And they know that, and we knew we had to learn how to deal with that when we had to go to school. So every time we had to go to where the villagers were, we had to go. We had to live with a lie, and that lie was we didn't like Americans. Our dad did not work with the U.S. government, and we're Iraqis. And if any student that approached us saying that America helped us or anything that had to deal with that, we had to change the stories. And so in the village, the teachers and the students didn't like us. The parents didn't like us. There were racism, amount of racism, amount of the hate against our family at that time. I remember Dad driving to the school and telling the principal that he would shoot anybody that would mess with us. They were messing with us so badly that we didn't feel like going to school anymore. So after that, things became a little better with that. So, but going back to the story that night, when Dad died 3 days later. Now, Mom's perspective is a little bit different than mine because I don't remember a good timeline.
Let me ask you something. After your dad died, the next day they came back, and like is what I've been told, and Grant and all of his unit were waiting for them to protect the family, correct?
Yeah, so the third night or the second night is when we had a big attack come into our house. So front of the house and where the main road comes in off the highway. I remember in the night picking in through the front gate, and I remember seeing a convoy of white trucks, which is usually is terrorist trucks, and they're
They put a mount on them. Yes.
Yes,
I
correct.
saw that a million times.
And they're usually Toyota white trucks that they drive, and
the guy stands in the back with a big old mount standing there, guard, ready to shoot people. Yes.
And I knew that time. I've never seen a car explode. We had a military base right here. We had an Iraqi military base, and they were shooting at us. And all I see is a car, they're dropping missiles, and the car goes boom. And I'm like, Jesus.
They were shooting at the car,
and the cars were shooting at us.
And they didn't realize they had walked right into an ambush.
Yes.
And they all paid, I gather.
Yes. And I remember that day they cleared up all the trucks off the road, off of there. Now, and that night, an Iraqi unit came to us. They were protecting us. Now, we were so scared because we didn't know if they're Iraqi, American, or terrorists. And
you knew that the Americans were good for sure.
Yes.
But the Iraqis, you didn't know if they were tribal.
Well,
somebody else said
and
the thing about tribe.
And the thing about at that time that was scary too is you didn't know if they were a clone. Like they can wear Iraqi soldier uniform, they can have Humvees, and they can come to you and act like
you never know it until they let you in.
You don't know until you know those people. So my mom at the door where the captain on the other side on the Iraqi force, finally he said his name because they came in banging and wanting. We didn't, at that time we were scared and terrified. And the most terrifying thing is for anybody, I would say, is getting their head cut off. Now, we rather have a bullet in our head, but getting your head cut off is a whole traumatizing thing. No one wants to get their head cut off.
That's not abnormal over there, was it?
No, this was not. So I had friends my age at the time that, their dad and his son actually got their head cut off on the train track because their dad helped the U.S. and the Iraqis. So there's a lot of stories like that where close friends to us, close family friends that had nothing to do with the U.S. and nothing had to do with Iraq, just had to do something to protect their family and their businesses. So just to get their businesses out there, they were getting attacked. They would come to you and say, hey, you can't sell that drug at the clinic. And you're like, they're going to put a bullet in you. And guess what? You have two choices. Either you stand up and fight for your freedoms, or you die. Let them shoot you. So you have two choices. And
it's an easy choice when you are an armed soldier, but it's not an easy choice when you are an unarmed civilian.
Yes, and a lot of the civilians are, I mean, they just send them a letter with a bullet and a letter, and, you know, they'll get that letter at their house at midnight, or they'll kill one of their sons, chop them in a bag, and put that in a bag and deliver it. And so, now, for a kid like me that was 11 years old, and to see all this trauma and all this, now for me, I felt like that was the world. You know, I didn't know what normal world is like, what it lives like. So
it's amazing how you get used to crazy after a while, isn't it?
yes, and you become crazy just like that.
Just like that.
And unless some other person is telling you you're acting or you're doing those specific behaviors, I mean, at one point I was hanging dolls because my mind was so fucked up. I didn't know how to play with dolls. I was hanging them and burning them until my grandma came to me and she's like, "That's not alright." And she like talked to me and finally got me restored back.
You don't want to be like these people. You
No.
don't want to be like them.
No, and you don't. But so much violence, so much hate, right? That's just all around you, not just your family or not just what's happening. It's just all around violence. So, sorry, take a breather.
I also know that you got caught up in firefights at your house between your brother Omar and you. He had told me that your dad had taught you how to shoot weapons and you had to defend yourself on multiple occasions.
So I can give you a story. Dad had to leave where Sajuda was, which Saddam's wife. She had her little private house. It wasn't that far away from our house. And so Dad wanted to go there and get a few items because she had like a luggage, trees and a little farm that grew fruits and things like that. And she had her own private lake, so Dad would always go fish there for us. And that night, Dad gave us tracing rounds. They're Russian tracing rounds. So when you shoot them, you get a green one, a red one. And at the time, we didn't have iPhones or somewhere to communicate. So if he left, we'd have to shoot a round toward his way so he would know we're in trouble. So my brother Omar actually knows how to shoot a Russian sniper. We had a Russian sniper. I don't know what they call it. But that's what we had, and I had an AK pistol. I remember I learned how to shoot a pistol because the AK was too heavy for me. So Dad gave me blank rounds because the wheel rounds were too heavy for me to shoot. So the blank rounds, if somebody's coming around, I could just fake it. So I remember a guy was coming that night, and I looked from far away, and this guy's wearing black, kept coming out toward us, and we stopped him from, I would say, not 1,000 yards, about 600-800 yards away. And we told him stop. We yelled at him. We had military dogs, so our military dogs listened to us. And we didn't let our military dogs to go after him. So Omar shot around toward him, almost took off his head. And the guy dropped down when Omar told him to drop down. Because anybody that comes to our property has to follow our rules. Like, if you came in and you drove someone off, you're going to get shot off because we don't know who you are.
Right.
And so
obviously, because you've had run-ins with bad guys.
Yep.
Why would you not think somebody else isn't a bad guy?
So there's a metal post there where we usually just it was a metal post that was for a military radar that we just had it there. So I remember the guy came in, I was pointing the pistol at him, and Omar was like telling him to walk to the metal post, and Omar pointed the gun at him, and I remember grabbing the barbed wire and wrapping him up with barbed wire and had the security dogs or dogs at him, but not biting him or anything. And I remember the guy wanted water, and I got him dog water. And he's a human being, I knew that, but I didn't know how big of a threat he was to me. So
right.
I treated him not like a human being at that time. So Dad comes in, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, this guy came in, and we're telling him about how he came in, and we told him to stand down, walk away, didn't listen to us, kept coming. And at that time, he was just, he's all tied up like this with the barbed wire. And Dad asked him a couple questions, and he knew he lied. Because usually if you ask, what's your name, what's your last name, and usually you can figure out what tribe, what town they're part of. And he wasn't giving straight up answers. And I remember Dad slapping him. And when he slapped him, he knew how to answer. The next answer, good. Second answer, third answer.
He figured out he was not going to lie to your dad because your dad was going to get it out of him one way or another.
And so we figured where he was from, sadly, he was just a guy that was from the village doing some work. His car broke down. He was just looking for water, and he got lost. So, unfortunately, that's what happens.
You don't know.
You just don't know when it comes to those things. But before the day that Esra was actually born, is me and Omar got attacked that day.
Where were you at when Ezra was born?
I don't remember when Esra was born.
Ezra was born, actually, I think it was before that, I don't know for sure. Ezra was born in the green zone.
Esra was not born in the green zone.
Or no, it was April. It was April who was born in the green zone.
No, April was not born in the green zone.
Which one of the two was born in the green zone?
No one was born in the green zone. April was born in the slums of Baghdad. And none of us are born in the green zone. We stayed in the green zone.
Oh, wait a minute. So when she came to the green zone on March 5th, 2005.
She was a baby. She was only a month years old.
So she had already been born?
Yeah. Actually, April is what made us go back a month. We're supposed to actually leave a month earlier.
And she was actually premature even then.
Yeah, she came out very mature. She actually was born in my grandma's house. I remember that day.
In the south of Baghdad?
Yes. And
this was before April 5th, actually, right? I mean March 5th.
Yes.
Because you left on May 19th.
So, yes. May 19th we left. April was born on April 12th. So, May 19th we left. May 25th we came to the U.S. So.
Wow. So it was a very trying time, because when you came into the green zone, they brought you in to protect you, and they got you, as we've talked to several of your people, they picked you up at the train station, brought you in. What about Iraq that you remember the most? Is the brutality of it? Is there anything about it that you remember that was good?
Yes, I do
What?
I remember all the shrines, the sites, the people, the restaurants.
It's history, isn't it?
It's the history, the goodness of like the culture, right? So the celebrations, I remember before all the war and everything happened, I was just living in a regular country, and we're just doing regular things that people usually do. So, and it was great. Like, no, we didn't have problems with anybody besides Saddam's family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since you're a history buff, look right behind you. The road to Madinat al-Salam, the original name of Baghdad, City of Peace.
City of Peace.
Uh-huh. And so it's an ancient city.
And so for me, I'm an Al-Abase, and my ancestors are the ones who made Baghdad. They're the ones who created Baghdad. And
the round city, actually, one time.
Yep.
And so it has a history that Americans in American cities do not have, because this goes back 1,000 years. This is why when I read about Madinat al-Salam, trying to explain to people, this was the city of the round at one time, one of the first cities in the Middle East, and it has a history, a long history.
So I'd say one of my favorite areas in Iraq would be the mountains and the Kurds. Like, as you pass the mountain valleys, this beautiful river and luscious green with the fruits there are amazing, by the way. So like watermelons, pomegranates, right? Like the foods are just so rich and so tasty.
Yeah.
And the thing about where we live is you buried anything, you can grow anything off of there. It just depends on
it's
the
the
area.
breadbasket of the Middle East at one time.
Yes.
And Kurdistan is gorgeous.
It's very, very beautiful. To this day, I would love to have a house up on the mountain ridge, just because I would like to have a house out there. My ancestors do have a castle out there, up in the mountains. It's one of the Al-Abase that built a house out there. So I remember driving with Dad and just seeing that castle and just learning about the history of it. So.
Do you remember the time you spent with your father?
I did. I actually can give you a really good story. I remember one day with Dad, me and Dad because we had to pick up scrap metal, and we picked up scrap metal from tanks that were blowing up. We picked up scrap metal from pretty much anywhere, like round heads like this.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's 100 pounds of scrap metal right there.
We would take the copper. We don't take the metal. We just
Oh.
find the copper piece. We'll like literally sit there and like burn cables to get copper. We take all of that and go north, and they would sell all that material, and for exchange we get cash, because there was no jobs back then. It's just how can you
scrap money together.
Yeah. So they would sell all that scrap to actually Turkey. So Turkey took all the scraps from Iraq.
Really?
Yes. Because I remember.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because the Iranians and the Turkish were in Kurdistan.
Yes.
And I'm not saying literally the Turks were in Kurdistan, but they did cross the border occasionally when they weren't supposed to. And the Iranians did it on a regular basis. But yeah, that makes sense, because that would have been the only place that they could have sold or made money at.
So I remember that night we left at 4 in the morning. Me and him, he got me up at 4 in the morning, and he had a double mag with him, like usually, and he had an additional double mag. So we're driving, and we went through Tikrit, and we had a checkpoint, and Dad had all of his documentation with him. And I remember the
Genesea papers, right? Genesea.
Yep. And so he had all of his papers, and I remember the officer looked at us, and he's like, "I'm gonna take that double mag." And Dad was like, "No, I need it." And the guy's like, "No, we're gonna take that double mag. You can leave your single mag." And he took the mag away from us. And after that, Dad wasn't happy for a second. But anyways, we got to go up north, sell the scrap. I remember he took me out to a restaurant that was out there.
Yeah. You ever get up to Connaughton, by the way?
What was that?
You ever get up to Connaughton by chance? Connaughton, Iraq?
I
Right on the border in Kurdistan and Iran.
No, not. That's too far. I didn't go that far.
That's where I was stationed at for a while.
The place I went to was called Tammuz, a little small town, north of. I don't remember exactly where it's at, but I remember I knew where the mountains were. I remember from the driving, so I have this like blueprint in my head where I lived all in Iraq. So I have this whole like map in my head. So if I can go on a map and point like here where I lived, here where I went. So
interesting enough, Kurdistan was one of the most peaceful places you could be in Iraq during the war because the Kurds didn't tolerate anybody coming up there stirring trouble.
Yes, that is correct, and for us it was tough because we had spoken. Now we're half Sunnis, half Shiites, half Sunnis, and when we go down to Baghdad, we had to change our terminology because people would know if you're from the north or the south, or if you knew they were Shia or Sunni because they had different terminology. Mm-hmm. And I remember at one point we're just gonna speak Kurdish. We're like, fuck it. We're just take us to Kurdistan. And I remember at one point where we had to like flee.
I don't know if that's a great idea either, frankly. Yeah.
But we had a lot of Kurdish friends at the time. Dad had a lot of Kurdish buddies, and
Was that one of the reasons he had such an issue with Saddam's policies? Because Saddam, during 1998 and during that time, Al-Hadid or whatever the area that he was at as northern Kurdistan, they did an Arabization of that area. In other words, removing the Kurds and putting Arabs in there and giving them their homes and their properties. Your dad was the kind that would never have tolerated that kind of thing, no matter what their religion or ethnic group was, correct?
That is correct. My dad, my father, stood up for the right things, right? So for freedom. And
no genocide of the Kurds.
Right. I mean, you can, if somebody had a conscious thought, I mean, it's common sense. You can directly look at something that's evil, inherent evil, and if you call it out, you're going to call it out. And if you don't call it out, you don't call it out. And Dad called it out.
Which didn't sit well with a lot of people.
It didn't sit well with a lot of people, and there was a lot like people like that too. It wasn't just him, but he came from a very powerful family, so it was hard for the government to deal with him. If he came from a less family, they would just hang him and
Do you think that's why he got to walk out of Abu Ghraib? Because of the power his family had?
Yes, absolutely. Because if he wasn't from the Al-Abase tribe, and if he wasn't who was related to, he would have just been hung that day. Unless he had committed a huge threat against Saddam's family members, then that would be a different story.
And your dad saw the inequities in the Iraq system. He spoke up about it, and he ended up 5 years total in Abu Ghraib. Came back, and they still never let him off the hook. ISIS kept going after him.
So after we left Abu Ghraib, after Dad left Abu Ghraib, he came to Baghdad to visit us, and he told us, "Hey, we have to leave, and you have to come live with us." And he was doing his parole, and for his terms to do parole is we had to go live with Saddam's uncle's family on the side, and they lived on a farm, and they had other farmers and things like that. And so for Dad's parole, he's a farmer originally, and he would have to farm a whole section for them, whatever that would be. And I remember we farmed. I hated doing cotton, by the way. Picking up cotton it's not fun, right?
Okay.
I remember I had diabetes when I was a kid, so I remember the villagers were telling me to eat eggplants. So I remember eating raw eggplants out there because we had an eggplant farm that we farmed, and Saddam's family on the side, they had orange farms, huge amount of orange farms, and every time we ate one of the oranges, we'd always get in trouble with them. Man, oh man.
Yeah.
And so, but one of the guys was a Shi'i guy. I don't remember his name, he was one of the farmers that was working there. He had a job out there, and one of the family members of Saddam's uncle's family members, I don't know, he was a guy, very powerful, had an issue with the dude. Dad got into the conflict anyways, and somehow, I remember they were in front of our house, they were arguing, fighting, and they took the guy, and this is from stories that we heard, not seen, and now we've seen their dogs. Their dogs are fucking cruel. Like, we couldn't even come near them because they'll fucking chase you down. And their dogs are like scary, big freaking boys. So that guy had a feud with them. They put them in a container and put the dogs. And this is a well-known thing where Saddam's family would feed people to dogs. I mean, this is, you talk to people and they know this. This is a true thing.
Oh yeah, and so, talk to people down in Baghdad. They'd feed them to the lions. That's why they kept the lions.
And the callous and the evil in their spirit is just like, I mean, you don't see that anywhere where like a person just treats another human being like they're nothing. So there's no.
It's crazy. Do you miss Iraq?
I do miss Iraq. I do miss Iraq a lot. Why? It's my land. I can hear, like, because I'm an Iraqi earthling, and since I'm an Iraqi earthling, my land would always want me back. It's where I'm from. So, like, if you're from America, there's a spiritual connection to it.
You could separate the government and their actions from the people.
Yes, correct.
Because the people are gentle, loving people.
Yes, correct.
The government is not.
No, they're not. So.
Okay, and your mom has been a rock for all of you. How has she shaped your life?
My mom, how she shaped my life? That's a really good question in so many ways. I mean, the courage that she has, the faith that she has in God, the faith that she has in her family, and just the attitude of having that smile on our face. You know, don't let anybody take you down. Stand up and fight. Put your head straight up. And she always reminded us of that. And that's the courage that we learned from our mom.
She also was a very hard worker.
She was.
And she worked 2 jobs, right, one time? Tell me about that.
And when mom, let's say when dad was in jail, we didn't see him, she would clean other people's houses. She would make bread and sell their bread. And I remember there was orphan kids that came by, and we gave them bread. There were a young kid and a girl, I remember, and I don't remember who they are anymore. I hope they're alive or doing good. But I remember these kids would always come to us, and mom would always take care of them, and they became part of our family.
Right.
But mom always, before that, she always worked hard for her family and provided. And so when she had us, she really put in the work to do whatever she can.
The work level that she took on only increased after she went to North Dakota.
Yes. So in the U.S. it's a whole different story. At that time when we came, I'd say the first 3 years was really tough for us. We did have help for sure, but not like where, if like, let's say we have iPhones now, and the amount of technology we have, you can call a taxi, you can pick an Uber. Well, back then we used to just walk to Walmart 3-4 miles in the winter time and grab our groceries and come back. We didn't know how to call and communicate that until a couple of years later. We learned, okay, call a taxi. Taxi comes in, picks you up.
Yeah.
And so for us, at that time when we came to America, it was a whole different world. I mean, we came to heaven. We won the lottery at that point. I mean, thinking about it, we won the lottery. I mean, who else out of 35 million people in the war that get picked up
get out of there
and get out of there, and we come here and we get treated like we're, you know, some kings and queens, right? But to us, we're just an average family.
So how important were Grant and Shane and the 141st?
I mean, I remember, okay, some of the guys, we'll see them in Fargo, right? And I remember one of the guys just teared, I'm trying to remember his name, sorry. Hobby or guy's name. Anyways, I remember I saw him that night. I was going out to party, and this was like several years ago, and I just got out and we saw each other, I think, at Denny's, and he was telling me about, you know, we were just talking about history and everything, and he was telling me about, he was, you know, like he didn't save anybody. And I looked at him and I said, no, you're actually incorrect. You saved us, and you saved yourself.
Yes,
I
right.
said, you're a soldier. You did actually save us. You did do something right. He felt guilty that he did all the things he did because he was younger and all the things that happened to him. But end of the day, he did something that matters to me, and I was there, and he gave me a hug, and that made him relief to see that, right? Like, you go into war, you fight, and you think you didn't really save anything, you didn't contribute, but you did. Every single person did, either good or bad.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I had heard that some of the 141st soldiers, and I can't say who, felt guilty about your dad's death. They dealt with the guilt of that for a long time.
And knowing that now, it's giving me goosebumps. They just had such a good connection with us. When they came over to our house in Iraq, we made food for them. We knew how tough their life was as soldiers, as American soldiers. We knew they had families. And this is a taught that my dad and my mom taught us. It wasn't something that we learned. Is mom and dad already lived in wars. They've already seen how terrible it is. And so they've already seen the trauma and things like that. And so for us we hanged out with the Americans, right? We hanged out with the Iraqi soldiers. If you had an Iraqi soldier and an American soldier at our house together, eating between each other.
Right.
So we're that family, right? That glued two cultures together, that showed love and what is it to be human? Like, the soldiers came in and played cards with us.
Right.
They'd get off of their station, they take their guns down.
And they played soccer with the kids.
They play soccer with us. Or they let us touch other weapons sometimes. It would be fun because we're a house where you could shoot anything. Right. So sometimes they let us, play with the guns. They let us touch some of the computers, laptops. Laptops were like, you look into Humvee and it's like it has all this fancy technology. And a lot of the soldiers were just amazing. They make us laugh, smile, give us candy. Really, it's like I felt love from them. And it felt like when we saw the U.S., this is a story that I really wanted to tell, is we would go down to visit my mom's family in Baghdad. So I was playing with Omar was with me actually that day.
Well, that was in the Plymouth portion of Baghdad, correct?
No, this is Saudi City. So Saudi City was a district that was built before, I don't know if it's the 80s or 70s. I haven't done my research, but Saddam built it because there was a huge amount of population that was happening. And so they needed to build districts. And so on the east, north of Baghdad.
Off the Tigris, off the east of Tigris.
Yep, right there. He built all these districts. And he didn't build them with good plumbing. He built them really cheap for the projects.
They were bad, yes.
In other words, we call that the projects, right? So, and it was a Shi'i heavy community. Yeah. And they really got inspired by, there's a history to it, right? So, and we can go back all the way to the 90s, to the history of just alone that, we can spend hours in talking about that. But at that point, it wasn't called Saudi City, it actually was called Revolution City.
But that's where Al Sadr came from. And that's also where they built the U.S. Embassy straight across from Al Sadr City. It was literally built on the Tigris. You could literally look right across the way and see Sadr City. And it was a slum.
Yes. And so at that point, I remember just playing with the kids. We're going out to play soccer around where the school district is out there. And since you're in Saudi City, there's a militia there. And there was a gang was in control. They were called they're called Jaysh al-Mahdi.
Okay.
In Arabic. I don't know what they call them in English, but
Jaysh
al-Mahdi was an organization under Sayyid al-Sadr, which is he formed it, right? And there were Shi'is. They were against America and against terrorism, right? They didn't like that America was in the country, right? Their perspective was different. So I remember when the convoy would come in, and now the convoy in Baghdad in the slum city is so different than the convoy that is in Samarra. This convoy is armored. There's no gunners. I mean, these vehicles are way, way more armored and protective. And the kids...
They're MRAPs, correct?
Yes, and there's all different vehicles. I remember the kids were throwing rocks.
It wouldn't do any good on an MRAP.
And I remember a gunner got up there, got hit with the rock. He was bleeding. They stopped it. I remember there's a little ditch. Me, Omar, and my uncle Ahmed ran in the back behind that ditch. And we're far away from the kids. Mm-hmm. And so this is an empty field that separated the districts. And so we're playing in this empty field that they threw garbage or whatever. And we hit behind there, and we were just looking from far away. And I remember that U.S. soldier came out of there and beat the living shit out of the kid.
Really?
And it wasn't like pleasant because the kids themselves were ruthless against the soldiers, and because of the militias had to pay the kids, and they had to demonstrate to show them that you're gonna have kids, we will attack. Because how are you gonna break that? Because eventually you're gonna create hate with the kids. So when they did that, the kids stopped attacking.
Well, the kids were using, if I correct me if I'm wrong too, they were using a munition called bouncing betties, which were essentially grenades that would literally come up about eye level, and then they'd go off, and these kids would set them off around these soldiers. Am I correct? Is that
Yes,
was something I heard they would do?
Yes. So a kid lost his family members, right? Doesn't have anything, or does have a family member, and they'll pay him $3,000-$4,000. That's American dollar. And
A lot of money over there.
In a wartime, I don't care if you're in any war. If you have American dollar and you're in a war zone, that's going to do a lot for you. That's going to propel you to leave the country, to do anything else with it. So people are willing to fight, to do it for money. They don't care because you're American, and they have this whole.
It's not personal.
No, it's not personal. It's all about take care of their family. Those are, we call them the bottom feeders, right? And you got the big fish. Those are the motherfuckers you want to go after. Is those guys.
I want to wrap this up with something very positive. Your mother is doing well here. Your family's doing very well. You are doing very well. You've had a chance to travel all across the country. What would you say to Americans 30 years after the war? What would you say to 20 years after the war? What was left behind over in Iraq, and what advice would you give to Americans about getting into these wars in the Middle East?
So the one thing about the war that no one really had a choice with it, the war happened, unfortunately, and it changed the country forever. It changed the generations in there. It changed the language. It brought freedom to the Iraqis. Sure, there was blood and shed, but looking back at it now, Iraqis have their freedom. They're fighting every day toward that. That's where we're at now. And so for the Americans, is even if there's a war in the future and things like that, always keep fighting for your freedoms and always stay in hope.
We've been speaking to Ahmed, and I want to say thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
And I really have enjoyed meeting you and your family. For the Military History Channel, I am Lloyd Shellenberger, and this is one more in the many parts of the Letters from Baghdad, Left Behind Letters from Baghdad series, in which we're going to be talking to all the people that we've written about, he being one of them, and Omar and all of them. We're going to talk to every one of them to get their perspective on Iraq, Baghdad, and the war. And all of that is a unique perspective, not an American perspective. I want to be very clear about that. That's an Iraqi perspective from somebody who was there. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for the Military Historian Podcast. I'm Lloyd Shellenberger, your host. Tune in for more podcasts on the PNN Academy. Thank you.